Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geostrategic Podcast. Thank you for watching or listening to the podcast. A U.S. nuclear submarine just appeared in Gibraltar, right after Trump rejected Iran's latest deal proposal. This isn't a routine deployment. The USS Alaska carries Trident nuclear missiles, and its sudden public appearance is sending shockwaves through NATO, Tehran, and global military circles. So why would Washington reveal one of its most secretive weapons now? And is this a warning to Iran, or the beginning of something much bigger? Stay with us because the strategic message behind this deployment could change everything in the Middle East. But before we break it down, hit like if you follow global military news, subscribe for real-time geopolitical analysis, and share this video so more people see what's unfolding right now. And I want your opinion. Is this smart deterrence, or are we watching a dangerous escalation toward direct conflict? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading and replying to as many as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the timing on this whole situation is just, it's undeniable, right?
Oh, absolutely undeniable. And, we just asked you if this is smart deterrence or a dangerous escalation. So to answer that, we first need to look at the massive military asset currently sitting in the Mediterranean and, well, why its visibility is so shocking. Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at the USS Alaska. Its official hull number is SSBN 732.
Right, the SSBN designation is the key part there.
Yeah, for anyone who, doesn't spend their days reading naval doctrine, SSBN stands for Submersible Ship Ballistic Nuclear. So the N means it's powered by a nuclear reactor.
And the B means it carries ballistic missiles.
Exactly. It's an Ohio-class submarine.
Right. And it is worth noting that this is a legacy platform, but an incredibly lethal one. The initial contract with General Dynamics actually goes all the way back to 1978.
Wow. 1978? That's older than I thought.
Yeah, and this specific boat was commissioned in January of 1986. But age doesn't diminish its purpose at all. It normally operates out of Naval Submarine Base Kings Bay down in Georgia, and it does so completely out of sight.
Right, out of sight being the absolute key phrase here. Because its payload is just staggering. I mean, it carries up to 20 Trident II D-5 nuclear missiles.
Yeah, 20 of them.
Yeah.
And each of those missiles can carry multiple independent warheads.
Which is wild. These submarines form the sea-based leg of the U.S. nuclear triad. You have your bombers in the air, your silos on land, and then submarines in the ocean. But the silos are known targets, right? And bombers can be tracked.
Right, right.
The submarines are the ultimate second strike guarantee because their entire purpose, their sole survival mechanism is to remain completely undetected in the deep ocean.
Exactly. They are basically the apex predators of the deep precisely because you just never know where they are.
Which is why this deployment is blowing my mind, honestly. Yeah. Parking an Ohio-class submarine in a dense, heavily trafficked commercial choke point like Gibraltar defies its very design.
Yeah, it really does.
I have to play devil's advocate here. It's like a high-stakes poker player intentionally dropping their cards face up on the table to show everyone they have a royal flush. You're taking the ultimate hide-and-seek champion and giving it a neon sign. Why on earth would Washington deliberately break stealth like this?
What's fascinating here is that breaking stealth isn't a mistake. Breaking stealth is the entire point. The last updates coming out from May 10th, 2026 show a deeply calculated shift in Washington's strategy.
A shift towards what, exactly?
Well, we are watching the U.S. move away from standard diplomatic pressure and shift directly into a reinforced, highly visible nuclear deterrence posture. Deterrence is essentially a psychological theater, The weapons only prevent war if your adversary fundamentally believes you're willing to use them.
So by surfacing it, they are making the threat tangible, like, here it is.
Precisely. You have to understand how exceptionally rare this is. Veteran naval observers, like the prominent analyst known as Old Submariner, have pointed out that this is only the third publicly observed U.S. Ohio-class submarine visit to Gibraltar in about 25 years.
Wait, really? Only the third time in 25 years?
Yeah. You do not surface a strategic nuclear asset in a crowded European waterway just to stretch your legs. You do it when you need to broadcast a very specific, undeniable geopolitical message.
Okay, so if Washington is intentionally dropping its cards face up on the table in the Atlantic-Mediterranean corridor, we really have to look at who is sitting across that table. And that audience isn't in Europe. The immediate political trigger for this is happening thousands of miles away in the Middle East.
Exactly. The geography is European, but the intended audience is squarely in Tehran.
Right. Let's look at the direct catalyst here. This deployment happened immediately after President Trump rejected Iran's ceasefire and nuclear counterproposal. The latest info shows that the rejected terms were just this tangled web of heavy demands.
Yeah, they really were.
Iran was pushing for specific negotiations over uranium enrichment levels, deep demands for sanctions relief, and highly contentious stipulations regarding maritime access.
That last point, maritime access, is the real flashpoint. The diplomatic avenue essentially hit a brick wall over who gets to dictate the terms of global trade. And immediately after that diplomatic door slammed shut, the USS Alaska surfaced in Gibraltar.
Which brings us to the severe maritime instability currently gripping the Strait of Hormuz. We are looking at a dual-layered crisis. Two rival powers are attempting to impose entirely competing controls over one of the most critical energy shipping corridors on the planet.
It's an incredibly tense situation.
Yeah. On one side, you have Iran demanding that all commercial shipping actively coordinate with its military authorities before they are allowed to transit. And the latest news shows they're even imposing financial transit conditions.
Which are essentially tolls or fees.
Right, on selected vessels.
It's a bold bid for sovereign control over international waters. I mean, if commercial vessels comply, Iran functionally owns the strait.
And on the U.S. side, they aren't just sitting back watching this happen.
Yeah.
American naval forces are actively conducting blockade operations, targeting Iranian ports.
Yeah.
They're actively choking off Iranian maritime supply lines.
It's an absolute pressure cooker.
It really is. So what does this all mean? By showing off this 18,750-ton submarine in Gibraltar, is Washington essentially projecting power into the Middle East without risking putting a strategic nuclear asset directly into the constrained, highly contested waters of the Persian Gulf?
Yes, that validates the entire strategy. Defense analysts monitoring the situation, such as Mario Nawfal, interpret this specifically as strategic deterrence signaling rather than any sort of routine transit. It's not about fear, it's about the unforgiving physics of the Persian Gulf.
Because it's just too dangerous for a sub like that.
Exactly. The Persian Gulf is incredibly narrow, extremely shallow, and heavily saturated with asymmetric threats.
Asymmetric threats meaning what, exactly? Fast attack boats.
Yeah, fast attack craft, low-flying suicide drones, underwater sea mines. It is a shallow bathtub full of cheap, deadly hazards. It is the absolute last place on Earth you want to put a strategic ballistic missile submarine.
Right, because if a lone $2,000 drone manages to strike that submarine while it's surfaced in the Gulf...
Washington just lost a multi-billion-dollar strategic nuclear asset for a photo op.
That makes total sense. The risk-to-reward ratio in the Gulf is just terrible.
Precisely. The USS Alaska doesn't need to be in the Persian Gulf to hit a target. Those Trident II DeFi missiles have a range of thousands of miles. Its presence in the broader theater sends the message perfectly well.
Safely tucked behind an Allied security umbrella in Gibraltar, but highly visible to global media. It demonstrates immense destructive capability without exposing the asset to cheap tactical risks.
Right.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. To prove that this was a deeply calculated message and not just a routine pit stop for supplies, we only need to look at the unprecedented prearranged logistics of getting the USS Alaska into port.
Oh, yeah. The logistics alone tell a story of immense intent.
I mean, the level of security theater witnessed on the ground in Gibraltar was staggering. Civilian observers like Peter Ferreri spotted the sub as it entered the strait. And local news updates from the Gibraltar Chronicle and GBC News confirmed the sheer physical difficulty of this port call.
Because of the size.
Yeah, we mentioned the sub is 18,750 tons submerged, and it is 170.7 meters long. It's a Leviathan. Because of its massive size, it actually required 2 heavy tugboats just for harbor maneuvering.
Right, because a submarine is designed to slice forward through the deep ocean. It is notoriously difficult to parallel park a 170-meter metal tube on the surface while battling harbor currents and wind.
I can imagine.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the immense vulnerability of putting an SSBN on the surface and expose commercial traffic. A submarine on the surface is really a sitting duck.
Even in a NATO port like Gibraltar.
Especially in a busy commercial port. We've seen historical examples, like the USS Cole, where a small boat packed with explosives caused massive damage to a warship. To mitigate this extreme risk for the USS Alaska, the British and American militaries had to deploy a massive, multi-layered security umbrella.
And this wasn't just thrown together at the last minute either. The latest info indicates that RAF transport aircraft actually flew in additional Royal Marines personnel ahead of time.
That is the key detail. They didn't just rely on local port authority. They pre-deployed specialized troops by air specifically for force protection.
I mean, think about the military bandwidth required for that.
Yeah.
They coordinated international airspace, flew in elite combat troops, and set up a perimeter just to guard the dock before the boat even surfaced.
And once the sub did arrive, Gibraltar Squadron patrol craft and the Gibraltar Defense Police enforced a strict 200-meter maritime exclusion zone around the South Mole naval facilities.
A 200-meter zone. The Royal Marines established heavily armed security positions along all the physical access routes.
It's the ultimate flex.
It really is. The financial cost, the logistical nightmare, the international coordination. Washington went through all of that just to make sure the cameras caught their Trident submarine sitting there. They wanted it to be safe, but above all, they wanted it to be seen by Tehran and by NATO alike.
It proves that every single aspect of this deployment was engineered for maximum visibility. But this raises an important question, and it's really the core paradox of the entire situation. Deterrence relies entirely on the adversary believing you will actually use the force you're displaying.
It's a psychological game of chicken, essentially.
Exactly. By pulling a ballistic missile submarine out of the dark and putting its most secretive nuclear assets on public display, Washington is playing its highest cards. They are signaling that they are prepared for the absolute worst-case scenario following the collapse of that peace deal.
The line has been drawn in the sand.
Yeah. But what happens to global stability if Tehran looks at this massive display of power and decides to call the bluff? When you put your ultimate weapon on the table, there are no more warning shots left to fire.
Man, if the bluff gets called, the next step is just the unthinkable. It's a chilling reality to leave you with, a high-stakes game of poker where the chips are nuclear and the table is the global economy.
Well, thank you everyone for listening or watching. We really appreciate you spending your time with us to dive deep into the mechanics behind the headlines today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. It's a critical situation to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. If you want to keep unraveling the complexities of global military strategy, we warmly invite you to check out and listen to the other podcasts for more geostrategic breakdowns. Until next time, stay informed.